Hello, welcome to tonight's painting demo. I am starting just a few minutes late here. I see that I might be missing some of my audience because they may be preparing for Hurricane Florence. And that's okay. I think last week we had at least one person that was affected by I forget the name of the hurricane that was down in Mississippi, Alabama. So tonight I'm going to be doing this painting of a young woman named Valbona. She was part of the selection process that I had on my Instagram channel, and I'm just going to dive right here into the painting, mixing up a sort of a batch of flesh tone. Here, flesh tones are actually a little bit on the darker side based on how she's lit. With her hijab being sort of a brighter, lighter teal color. Just want to get a little bit down here. I've just going to add a little bit of black to the color just to get it a little bit grayer and darker. Yep, that looks like a good place to start. There's some greens in the flesh tones too, so just going to mix those up a little bit. Not sure you can see it that well, so I'm going to tilt the camera a little bit more so you can see my palette in there. Sorry for this. Um, okay, I think that's probably a little bit better. I see that there's actually three people watching, including myself, would make four. So if you could just um, put in a little comment telling me where you're watching from, that I would appreciate that. That's gives me an idea of that there's somebody out there paying attention. Um, so I'm just going to get just right into it, block in a fair amount of these flesh tones. I'm trying to respect some of the drawing that's there, hold on to a little bit of it, so get a sense of where everything is. And yeah, just right now I have the paint kind of the consistency of like milk or uh, maybe even a thicker cream. And I kind of like that consistency. It has a nice fluidity to it and allows me to cover a pretty wide area. And then it also sets up that paint nicely for painting into. So just going a little bit too red. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some phthalo emerald to that, get it a little bit greener, especially up here in the forehead. That's just a little bit too thin. You can see it's starting to run, so I'm going to add some, get some paint back in there without too much of the Gamsol, which is my mineral spirit. That's a little bit better, but then I do want to lean back towards the red, yellow, orange. Yeah. Okay, just adding a little bit of color at a time and being kind of tentative because it's real easy to overdo it. Okay, that's still not hitting quite the right notes that I want, so I'm just going to keep on adding greens, yellows, and oranges until I get it about right. That's looking a little bit better. I mean, all said and done, I'm going to come in with some blues and purples and the flesh tones to get all that variation in there. And so I recently switched blacks. I was using an ivory black, and I'm sort of trying out this chromatic black. This is a Gamblin product. Let's correct the drawing a little bit there. I had her. You can see the eyebrow is very close to the eye, and I didn't have it close enough in the drawing, so I'm correcting that. Um, so Brighton's here. Great. Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada. Okay. I didn't realize. Never heard of medicine hat, but that's interesting. And so I am just diving right in here with some of the features, and I'm gonna mix up some of this iris color. She has really pretty color in her eyes. Or it's like a greenish, grayish blue, very dark. I don't know if that's her eye color or those are contact lenses, but it appears to be her eye color. Usually, you can tell with contact lenses they have kind of a opaque kind of look to them. That and that sense of transparency that you get with the real iris color is kind of hard to match with contact lenses. And of course, I looking at the whites of her eyes, they're fairly blue violet color, or actually more um, a greenish blue. So see if I can get that color matched. Still sticking to a fairly big brush, and the whites of her eyes is a fairly small area, so um, not really worried about it yet. I may come in with a smaller brush later to refine some of those details. And so I can see along the side of her nose there is a little bit of a shift to a darker violet color. And really trying, I'm guessing at the values here. Once I get more of the values and colors in, it'll be a little bit easier to judge. Okay, well, that purple is very strong, so I'm going to knock it down a bit. And then as the eye um, moves, as we move to the outside of the eye, I should say, then this moves towards red and maybe even a little bit of blue here. Let's restate the iris to give it, um, make it look like it's looking in the right direction. And then corner of the eye. Okay. Like I said, I'm using a pretty big brush. It's was a fairly new flat, which allows me to be able to use the edge of the brush to have a little bit more control, but now it's getting a little bit beaten up and fanned out, so it just is a little bit harder. Um, I kind of go through these cycles where I make do with the state of the brushes that I have, and then I'll buy a bunch of new brushes, and that'll just give me the ability to be a little bit more, um, have a little more control in the painting. And then eventually those do also get beaten up, and then I'm sort of back with um, suffering with old beaten up brushes. Okay, and there's this really lovely color in her cheek here. It's kind of a lighter pink, um, and I will only get that if the colors around it are just slightly grayer and darker. So it's all about color and value relationships to get those pretty close to being right. Okay, lock in some of that. And again, I have a similar color to that here. This is some of those beautiful reflected lights that are in various places in her face. And it would be really easy to lose the drawing here. There's a lot of very close values, and if I'm not careful and not paying attention, I could lose those. And then her lips are, I'm going to say something fairly close to purpley pink. So let's see if I can mix. I'm going to mix quinacridone red with some of the dioxazine violet, dioxazine purple rather. See if I can get something fairly close to that color. A little redder and lighter. I think I got something pretty close here. Yeah, that's a little bit darker and too intense, but um, I can just keep on coming in with a little bit of white to to model the lips, and then I can just slowly make them lighter. And I have to make sure that I'm getting the center of those in the right place. That's real important for um, making making you understand how that her face curves away as it she's looking, her tilt of her head is slightly down, and the placement of the lips will give us a little bit more understanding of the direction of her head. Okay, there's just a little bit of orange, yellow, green in her flesh tones right there. I want to go lighter. There we go. It's almost a blue. It's a lot of interesting color changes in her face. And I'm not really painting all the color variation yet. I will um, work that in later. Just trying to get some of the larger halftone color in there. Let's get some of her lip color up here. Great. And trying to get the lower lids in the right place. That curves up there. Okay. So that's just sort of the basic general color of her face, and then I can start to um, define some of the forms. I'm gonna get, this is one of my favorite brushes. This is a bristle brush that I've worn down to almost a point, and so it will. I can now use it to put in some smaller detail, and just because it's just worn down so far, it's not perfect. It's not as good as a detail brush, but for the way I paint, it's not too bad. Gives me quite a fair amount of control. And I'm going to get some of her eyeshadow color there, and then right underneath that is the sort of greenish flesh tones that I see coming in, kind of olive color underneath her eyes. See if I can get that color going. Yeah, well, I mixed something up that was like chartreuse, so I have to knock it down a bit. Let's see. Not too bad. Maybe just a little bit punchier than I want, but sometimes it's all about putting something down and then adjusting it, and just knowing how to adjust it once you get it down, as that sort of comes with experience. Okay, so let's see if I can get little details like nostril in the right place. Assuming that I have my drawing pretty close to being correct. You guys are pretty quiet tonight. That's okay. Um, like I said, if you want to let me know where you're watching from, I would appreciate that. Um, and especially if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer any of them. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and describe painting process and colors that I'm using. Um, let's see. I am trying to flick kind of back and forth my eyes between the reference photo and my painting. I think my drawing is pretty good so far. Um, so I'm hoping it's not going to require a lot of adjustment as I go. Um, but well, that remains to be seen. The painting that I did last week required a lot of repainting after I was done doing the demo, just because there was a lot of places where it just felt off, and I couldn't seem to get it adjusted right while doing the demo. So I just waited until afterwards. So Trixie is here. Hi from Michigan. John, hello from Toronto, Canada. Um, so that's got a couple Canadians going here, and Canadian border state. So none of you guys are going to be affected by the hurricane. So I think I think we have our East Coast kind of out of commission tonight, or at least those in the Carolinas and close to the Outer Banks. Just going to get an indication of separation between the lips. Okay, that's good. And want to try to get some of the modeling in the lips. I have the lips painted fairly dark. That means I can come in with some lighter colors and start defining that. Even the upper lip is quite a bit lighter than what I have it painted. Okay, so again, I'm trying to look back and forth quickly between the resource image and my painting. If I look at what you see on camera, my painting is going to look a little bit darker, and the monitor is going to look a little bit lighter than it actually is. So um, doesn't look like I'm matching the values, but it's actually pretty close to what I'm seeing. Let's try a little bit more blue green in that reflection, and I'm just gonna see, clean that up a little bit. I'm gonna focus on the eyes a little bit, see if I can get them to feel more dimensional, a little real. They're kind of looking a little scary at the moment, so let's try to see if we can get them to read properly. I don't think it will take a whole lot of detail to get them to start to read. Just getting the outside of the iris. I have to carve in a little bit to get back some of the white of the eye. Okay. And I'm going to, let me see, I need to push her pupil down a little bit here on the top to get her eye point in the right place. And then I can, once I get the shape of that iris right, then I can put in those highlights that are reflecting in her eyes. One thing I want to do here, just to get a little more sense of realism, is I need to paint the whites of her eyes darker, especially darker towards the upper lid, and then a little bit darker again towards the bottom. And that's going to help create that sense of curvature, and then have them correct in value in relationship to other things in the face. And then with that, I can come in with this blue tint that's got to get that light enough for it to read properly. Blue tint that's in the corners of her eyes there. That's a little bit too light. That's better. And then hold on to that edge of the iris. Restate the border on the other side. Now, I may be doing that a little bit too sharp, and then I can always soften it up by just rubbing a dry brush against it or coming in with more paint on either side of it. And so this is where I'm going to just put in pure white paint just on the tip of this brush, just so I can start to see um, those that reflection, those highlights. So that's really going to help get those eyes to really pop, make them feel like, get them almost photographic, especially if I get enough accuracy in the drawing. Some indication of the lashes there. And then a little bit of sharper dark where the lower eyelid comes up, and the mass of the upper eyelashes here. Okay, so that's kind of doing what I want. The Need to adjust that pupil a little bit to see if I can get it to be looking in the right direction. She's really looking at us. If I look at the painting, it looks like she's looking off a little bit to the right. So that's some of that is adjusting the placement of the iris. Some of it it's just making either side of the whites of the eyes lighter or darker, and sometimes that changes the appearance of where the eye is looking. It's real subtle stuff. Sometimes it takes going really back and forth for a little while until it um, kind of works. Let me get that try to get that eyeshadow color in there again. I lost some of that. It's almost a bluish green going there. That's too light. So a little bit of the phthalo blue with the phthalo emerald will give me that right color. Okay. And then restate these eyelashes. Just gonna rough them in a little bit. Okay. So I think that is enough. Well, it's bothering me. I don't have quite enough of the whites of her eyes showing on the bottom. So let me see if I can pull that back a little bit. Okay, that's a little bit better. I can always come back and do some adjustment there. Okay, great. Um, okay, we have Giovanni in here from Vermont. So kind of leaning northern tonight. Um, so let's see if I can improve a little bit on the drawing of the nose, just where those reflections are coming from, and a little bit of the shadow along the side of her nostril. Yeah, so I'm using too small a brush at the moment. Here I have, let me go to a little bit bigger filbert bristle brush. This will give me, I can come in with a little bit thicker strokes and start building up some impasta and texture. Although this brush is very stiff, and the tendency is that I'm kind of burnishing the colors in to the panel. If I get more paint on the brush, then I can really come in and get that some of those wet into wet effects. Knock get the rest of this color in. You can hear how much texture there is on the panel and how stiff this brush is just by hearing the friction noise. And I'm pretty far off in my drawing here because you can see the eyebrow is very close to where the eye is, so it's right about there. And so I have to then correct the top of that eyebrow. It shouldn't be too hard, except I have to overcome some of the black paint. That's that's not looking too bad. Okay, I kind of didn't give her an upper eyelid, so I can start to take care of that. Okay, great. And then just adjust the bottom of that eyelid too. Something like that. Okay, so just I'm going around and adjusting some of the values as I go, where I see that they're really off. So there's a lot more light there. Have some greens and oranges that are missing. Okay, that's closer to the right color. What I don't have is there's a lot of blue here in the flesh tones, and I'm kind of missing that. Let's just go right to it. And then it transitions over into this greenish blue shadow. Yep. Okay. So, really want to start to trim her eyebrows a little bit here. Get them in the right place visually. And I'm going to try to do with the other eye what I did to her her right eye, which is just to get them to feel a little more real. Let's get the whites in there, that sort of funky light bluish color. I don't mean funky, but just not not really the color you expect. And then it gets a little just slightly darker around the edges, and then where the eyelashes come in and the eyelid, just carve into that a little bit. Okay, Just need to push that iris over, just walk it over a little bit this way. That's better. Pupil towards the center, and then some of these highlights in there. If I have to come back and paint them later, that repaint them, that's fine. Just kind of want an indication of where they are. A little bit of indication of the lower eyelashes. And then I want to come in and get some of that turquoise eyeshadow in. Something like that. Okay, great. Want to adjust the edge of this cheek. I don't quite have enough face, inner face. Really hard color to see right here. A little bit violet, gray violet. Going into something like an olive green. Okay, and then I think it's going to be helpful to redraw the outer edge of her face. And to do that, I have to start to mix this, the color that's in her hijab. I can come back with more color and more white later. I just need to get that edge working right. And then along the edge of the headscarf here, I do have a little bit of a shadow. Kind of stops right there. Let's adjust the lips here, just this edge a little bit higher. Sometimes these moves are so small and so subtle. The brain wants to change it more, thinking that just a small, tiny little move like that isn't going to have an effect. But the fact of the matter is that sometimes those differences are so subtle, you have to really look and pay attention and move very slowly and carefully until you get something in the right place. It may look wrong, but it may be so close that it just requires just a tap of movement into an just a millimeter over or something like that until it's right. So I can see I just need the tip of the nose just slightly lower, and there's a lot of that blue color on her nose. I just have to have it come down just a bit lower. That's looking good. And soften up some of these value changes. Okay. Great. Okay. So I think I'm off to a pretty good start. I think if I just keep on going the way I'm going, there's enough accuracy in what I put down so far. If I make the right value adjustments and slight modifications here and there, then I can kind of get the effect that I'm looking for. Just keep it painterly, um, but feeling accurate also. That's sort of what I tend to want in a painting. That's just me personally. I like the evidence of the brushwork, but at the same time, I want it to feel real. So not have the brushwork be an excuse for why it's not looking real, but have it be a compliment to that. That just takes a lot of patience to get there. Okay. If someone can let me know how the sound is going, because I've had those problems with the sound a couple weeks ago where it just started looping um, every every other second or every 2 seconds. It would just keep on looping the same words over and over again. Hated that. Okay, so far so good. Thank you. Um, great. Okay. Um, just again, I'm just going back, comparing back and forth. And that upper lip is just going to be have a little bit more light there. Ooh, it's a little hot and muggy here tonight. I don't know how it is where you guys are. Maybe a little bit further north, it's not so bad. Okay, and let's see if we can get the right shape to this chin. You can just hear I'm just rubbing the color. I don't know if that's a good or bad technique. It's just what I feel like doing, and hopefully it'll work. It will work out. Just didn't. I didn't have almost no paint on the brush, and all I was doing was um, rubbing the color that was already on the board. So far, the board is smooth enough and the paint is thin enough that it's doing exactly what I want it to do. Okay, I'm going to restate that shadow that's between her face and the headscarf. And then just think the shape of her chin is pretty good. I just want to sharpen it up. Okay. And I think this highlight on the tip of her nose, I just think I just have it just so slightly too high. So I can go in and correct that. I need some grays, a few grays in here to get these colors to read right. Okay. just really kind of doing quite a bit of scumbling tonight, um, which allows me to get some more evenly blended tones. It's not um, it's not ideal if you're looking for wet into wet effects. Doesn't show off brushwork very well, but I guess sometimes when I'm not feeling quite as confident, then I'll work like this. If I'm feeling more confident, I'll whip out a bigger brush and really go for some of those more kind of big statement kind of brush strokes. Okay, great. Okay, so now what I need to do, clear off a little bit of my palette, and then I'm going to mix quite a bit of that turquoise kind of color. Oops, excuse me. So you need to get quite a bit of white down. I'm just going to put it right there. And the palette knife, if I can find it. Where are you, palette knife? I know it's around here somewhere, but that's okay. I can also just use my brush. Yeah, use the brush. And so I'm going to get just a little bit of that phthalo blue in there. Get almost as pure a color as I can. And then I just want a little bit of the phthalo emerald just to lean it a little bit more green. And try to keep it pure because as I tint it up, it's going to get a little bit duller. Yep, that's not too bad. Get some of that bright color in. I mean, it's a little bit gray, and I might be able to come in with even cleaner color. Like right there. Okay, so I wasn't being careful, and I did cut into her face a little bit. Okay, that's good. All right, clean off the brush again, get a new paper towel. If I was really trying to be scientific about getting really clean color, then I would get very clean um, Gamsol that doesn't have any washed brushes in it, so that I had really clean thinner to work with. And then I would just get just those two colors that I was mixing and make sure that I had no other colors in there. As it is, my mixture is a little bit contaminated, so I am going to lose a little bit of intensity of the color, but hopefully not too much. Don't really want to stop to um, go crazy with the clean colors. Okay. And this is why I like painting with these very modern chemical mixture colors. Um, yeah, Gamblin calls them modern colors, or so sorry about that. Had a little problem with my charger. I guess it wasn't charging, and so the power died on the phone. Hopefully, it will be up here again in a second. Looks like um, it looks like it's streaming, but I still am seeing on my screen that it's not playing. Hopefully, that will fix itself soon. Um, yep, I think it's going again. Am I back? Yep, looks like I'm back. Um, So sorry about that interruption there. I was just going and painting in the background color, and um, yeah, I the reason why the screen froze was that my phone had died. My charger was my charging cable didn't seem to be charging, and I didn't realize that until it just went out. And basically, in the video, I don't really see my the battery indicator, so I didn't know that it wasn't charging. Don't know why it wasn't, but I'm gonna just keep on going here. Yes, at some point I will get a handle on all these technical problems. Thinking about trying to, instead of doing Wi-Fi, set it up so that um, I'm filming through the desktop, some of the desktop live streaming tools. Maybe that will help with my some of the not the problem with my phone dying, but with some of the connectivity issues that I've had in the past. And hopefully it wasn't out for too long. I don't think it was, and so don't think we'll lose too much in the playback. Ooh, okay, so just again, just trying to block in a lot of this color. Maybe I'll try to go a little bit transparent. Might help get some of the intensity of the color that I'm looking for. Transparency is one way, kind of like with washes, is one way to get more um, vibrancy in color because you're using the color more like a dye where the light is passing through it, as opposed to using a lot of white to lighten it up. So, but the hard thing about working transparently is that you see a lot more of the the brushwork, kind of the thickness, the changes of the quantity of paint in each section. Whereas if you are painting opaquely and you have your color thoroughly mixed, then you can get a very large flat area where you don't see any brush strokes in it. So those are kind of the two extremes. One is if you're looking to have no evidence of brushwork, then you can kind of work that way very opaquely, or lots of very thin glazes. Um, but if you do want to see evidence of brushwork, you can work a little bit thinner. Um, if you have a board that's very smooth, then that tends to show the brushwork more. Let's see if I can get something close to white here, because that's kind of what's happening in the photo. Not quite that dramatic, but that's a good place to start. Um, okay, there. It's very warm here tonight. Okay. I think I need a bit of water going here. The other last week I broke my keyboard by essentially dripping water into it. So I'm being a little bit more careful not to hold the water right over the keyboard. Not that I poured water from the glass, but just the condensation coming off the glass was dripping, and that was enough to kill about three or four of my keys. So I have a new keyboard coming in the mail. Just right now, I have one on loan. Works fine, but it's a um, it's a PC keyboard on a Mac, and so it's a um, little hard adjusting to the different key commands that are um, not not the standard for Mac, but more for PC. So to do a little bit of a brain brain warp to get it to work. Okay, got a little green, a little black here. So again, I did mention that I switched to chromatic black, and this is a very transparent black. And if you build it up with glazes, you can get a fairly rich black out of it. Um, I had switched from ivory black, which is semi-opaque, and and you can get a fairly rich black pretty easily because of the little bit of opaqueness in it. Um, but so this chromatic black is made out of phthalo green and quinacridone red. They're opposites on the color wheel, and highly transparent, both colors. And so when you mix them together, then they neutralize each other out, um, and are very dark. And so you end up with something that looks essentially black. And then the benefit of that is when you're mixing it with other colors in the spectrum, that because they're fairly balanced, they don't theoretically they don't shift your colors quite as much. If theoretically, if I like take yellow and I mix a little bit of the black with it, I get should get something like a darker yellow. I mean, there's a little bit of a shift towards the green, but it's not quite as dramatic as. Um, and actually, a better test of this is mixing orange with the black, because that um, it's still shifting a little bit green, but not quite as much as with the ivory black. The ivory black makes it fairly gold, and that's because the ivory black is so cool that it's like mixing a little bit of blue into your color, whatever color you're mixing into it, and that tends to shift it um, in the shift the hue over a little bit. Okay, let's see if I can get some of these pinks in the cheeks going. Even a little more blue or purple. Okay, that looks about right. Um, just a touch of blue in there. Okay, there we go. And I'm looking to get some of that olive color that's underneath the eye. Okay. Um, I see Omero from Georgetown, Texas. Welcome. Just got that really thin line of the shadow that's there. It's really those little subtleties that make something look, give it a heightened um, realism. It's just tiny little things, tiny little details um, that then give you the idea, like, oh yeah, that looks like her flesh with a little bit of reflected light in there, but it's just getting those subtle little changes that gets that to work. Okay, so overall, this is pretty good. Just want to cover the little bits of panel that are left. This is not a painting where I'm going to show a lot of the panel. Um, I accidentally stuck my brush right into the phthalo um, emerald, and so I have to clean some of that up, or it's going to get into every color. So just going to scrape that back a little. Great. Okay. So I was trying to get this grayish blue that's back here. Touch of black in there. And so this is my chromatic black that I'm mixing in. And along with changing my black, I've also changed my white. I'm now using radiant white, which is a like titanium white, which is mixed with linseed oil. It's still the same titanium colorant, but it's using safflower oil as its base, which is a has a higher level of clarity, and so looks slightly bluer and cleaner than the titanium white. To me, so far, it's such a subtle difference. I have a really hard time seeing any difference. I suppose if I put them side by side, or tints that I made side by side, I might be able to see some of the difference, but it's just really hard for me to see it. In this painting, where there's so many blues and greens, having the radiant white is useful because it helps me keep the colors cleaner. But again, it's so subtle, it's really hard for me to see it. Oop, meant to get some phthalo blue in there, and I went for the ultramarine blue by mistake. But let's get some of that color in here. Okay, so I do have some folds of fabric. I'm gonna go back to my little pointier brush to get some of that detail. Kind of, I can come in kind of sketchy, um, almost like a pencil with this. It does come to a pretty clean point, and it has a lot of stiffness to it. So it's really good actually for doing some almost something more like drawing with it than painting. Okay, great. Um, Sorry, I got a little quiet there for a minute. My sound hasn't gone out. I just stopped talking. Okay, so I'm just a little bit off in the direction of her face. I can come in. I can see I've given her a little bit too much distance here, um, between the mouth and the side of her face. So I can come in and carve a little bit, given that I have the right color on the brush. Just come back just slightly. Um, I think the tip of her nose is off just a little bit, so I'm gonna try to do the same thing with the tip of the nose. Wrong color, but that's okay. I can adjust. A little bit of black with the red just to get it right in here. Okay, that's looking a little better. And then need to change the angle of the side of her face just a little. My tendency is to skew the drawing a little bit. Um, I always skew in the same direction. So if I'm really paying attention, then I can pick up on that. I don't know if any of you out there have had experience with skewing. I think everyone does it to some degree. That's why you can use looking in the mirror as a way of correcting for that. And and I do have a mirror here, but I just it's hard for me to to discipline myself to slow down and to use it. Um, and it's most helpful towards the end of the painting when you already have some of these the drawing done that you can really see it. Some people like to work with a mirror behind them, so all they have to do is turn around and look in the mirror at their painting, and then they can see quickly where they've skewed the drawing. Okay, and again, I have the cheek out too far, so I need to cut back in a little bit. Okay, great. Okay, so I think I'm pretty close to everything pointing in the right direction now. Just do a little bit more adjusting. It's a lot of greenish blue on the side of her face right here. Need to go a little bit darker and bluer. I have to figure out. Okay, there. I think that it's about there. And then a little bit redder along the side of the cheek here. Okay. Okay. So now I'm really going to focus on working towards the finish. Since everything is about where I want it, there may be little adjustments, but it's mostly about getting nice, clean finish strokes down as I go, just and adjusting as I go at the same time, so that I'm getting those strokes kind of in the right place. Let me get this shadow line here. Really pushing really hard on that brush so I just can feel where the panel is. Okay, so made it clear that I want to come in pretty much a little bit tighter there with the fabric. I think that's close, a little bit better. But then I'm going to work back a little bit the other way right there. And just going to keep on adjusting where I see like the head looks like it's tilted down a little bit more than what I have in the drawing. Then I have to do things like pull the eyebrows down lower till I get that sensation that she is tilting her head slightly. That's not bad. Okay, so let's focus in on the eyes, clean it up, and then work out from there. I want the eyes to be the focal point, and I am about an hour and 15 minutes in. Hopefully my phone is charging. That didn't seem to die this time, so um, that's a little disturbing. You're doing a live feed and your phone goes dead. That's um, not really what I wanted to have happen. Every week it seems to be like something a little different. Last week I don't know, my picture froze. I just saw kind of a spinning wheel, so I guess that was um, my video going out. Um, the week before was a sound issue. The week before that seemed to be pretty good without a lot of problems, but I've had other issues going back further. Just something about this live feed technology isn't quite where it needs to be yet. Really need to get pretty dark with the iris color. I painted it here a few times, but each time it doesn't look quite dark enough. And that's maybe because I got a little bit too much white in the mixture. And if you look really closely at that iris, you can see there's almost like an olive green color, which I can get kind of by mixing a little bit of orange um, with the phthalo emerald. Yep, there it is. And get a little more black in there around the edge. Oops, a little too much. Luckily, I can just come back with my light gray mixture here and just a little bit towards the top. There we go. And adjust those eyelashes. Want to make sure that I get the upper lid painted in here. It's too light. Okay. Um, okay, who's all with me still? You guys are being so quiet. Okay, getting really slow. Get the eyelashes. Remember, I want to try to make this finished. So whatever I put down, I want it to be like right on. She's got a lot more darks down on her lower eyelid that I don't have. Mostly because she has her eyelashes here pointed out. Not too bad. Forgot about that eyeliner color though. I'm just going to indicate a little bit of it. Okay, it's not getting the blacks really black enough. It's kind of hurting me a little bit. And part of it is that there's so much light reflecting. If I maybe turn my light a little bit, that'll help me see it. But the paint is so wet in that area. So a little bit of alizarin permanent here with just a touch of black. And a little bit of that same color coming up. Okay, starting to get there with the eye color. It's a little tricky since it goes so dark. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to do this without resorting to tiny little brushes. I'm going to repaint that highlight there. Just, I had it too white, at least the highlight that was on the white of the eye. These little dashes of reflection are pretty close to white. this part a little bit is about pacing. I've said this in a previous video that just by looking at other painters' work where there's all this evident brushwork, I just assumed that they were painting very rapidly. But then after watching a few tutorial videos of some of the artists that I follow, um, I could see when they got to certain areas, they got really steady and slow to get the paint down exactly where they wanted it. And that really changed things for me because I just assumed that they had to be working quickly. And then when they're working with so much accuracy, it was hard for me to understand, like, how did they do that? How do they work so quickly and then get each brush stroke exactly where it needed to be? And the answer was that they were working really slowly. And without having the benefit of watching those videos, I would have never known that. Okay, I need to make her face a little bit less pointy around her chin. See if I can get there. Okay, let's see where we are. A little more water. And tight and continue to adjust those eyes to get them looking right. Okay, that's good. I want to see a little bit more of the eye color, which means just going a tad lighter to be able to bring out the color. That's looking pretty good. On this other eye, it's about getting a little bit darker color up here, or at least some color that's not reflecting the light quite as much. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Then see if I can start to get that much darker black going there. Here on this side too for balance. Okay. Okay, like I said, I'm trying to get everything nice and clean at this point. Kind of finish strokes, confident, clean, and some of that is just getting some of the precision that I'm looking for. Okay. Again, working now in the get these turquoise colors working, getting them very light without them getting too dull. And so that's being very careful not to get them contaminated. In some areas, painting more thinly, and then getting enough darks around them that they start to read. So one such area is right here, kind of where her wrap is, has a little bit of shadow to it. Okay, get this working. Excuse me. Okay. Um, so I have a lot of softness in the face here, and I want to keep some of that. Um, want to keep those transitions of colors really soft, but I also want kind of little areas that are a little bit sharper that pull the eye in. So to do that, um, kind of come in with a little bit stiffer brush maybe. Come in with some of those smaller details, but keeping them nice and sharp. Right there. So if you're familiar with aperture settings that give you depth of field, meaning that um, some areas are in focus and other areas are out of focus, that's kind of like what I want to do with this painting is to keep the parts that I want to come forward in focus, and then try to get a fair amount of the detail that's not there, keep it out of focus. Okay. Uh, Dirar Dido, I don't even know how to pronounce that. Almost looks Icelandic or something. Says, nice work, amazing, thank you. I'm just going to keep on pecking away at these eyes until I get them just where I want. Didn't really keep the paint thin enough here, but that's okay. There's a little bit of ridges um, where the brush strokes are. Okay. I need to make her nose just slightly longer, just a little bit, especially where the tip is, not, I mean, where the top of her nose is. But it's more the tip of the nose that I need to bring down just a hair. Something like that. Maybe even bring this nostril down a little bit. Yeah, it needs to come down just a hair. So all I did was I kind of moved the mark that was in the nostril just by sliding a brush over it, almost like a smudge tool in Photoshop. And that allowed me just to move it, just to budge it down without having to repaint it. I mean, it was just a dark line essentially. Okay, um, let's see if I can really hone in here. So, things I want to focus on are trying to get the head feeling like it's tilted downward, and little places in the edges that are kind of in the wrong place. Moving those, correcting them will help this quite a bit. Okay, and a little bit of the lights in here that help turn the form. Okay, so trying to think if there's anything I want to tell you guys. Painted or not painted, painting or not painting related. One thing that I want to tell you is that I've started an email list. This is basically to give artists notifications when I start a new painting, when I add something to my Etsy shop, for example, when I'm posting new videos on YouTube, and or if I come out with any educational materials or anything like that, you would be notified by email. Notified. Good English. Yes, you'd be notified by email. And so you would. Where's the? I didn't really put a subscribe link yet from YouTube, so I will try to figure out how to let YouTubers know. There's some links from my Instagram channel, but from YouTube, I really just haven't set it up yet. Sorry, it's still all a new, fairly new thought to build a mailing list. Um, One of the reasons some people have subscribed to my email list so far is because I'm offering a free layered Photoshop file of a portrait tool. It's essentially is a portrait chart showing various sizes in relationship to a full a half portrait. It's not really a half portrait, a third portrait. um, but this shows different panels and how the portrait will be cropped with um, each variation of panel size. Let's keep on going with the redrawing of the chin. I think I actually found the actual spot where the chin and cheek change direction right here. It's taking a while back and forth to get there. And the corner of that cheek is actually quite a bit lower and not as pronounced. It's looking good. Just needs to be slightly rounder. That's good. Sorry, falling asleep here. So I'm going to wrap it up soon just because I have not been getting quite enough sleep. And this is pretty close to being finished, and I can just finish it more quickly offline. So um, I'm just going to call it a night here. There's not much more I can really do that would be for your benefit here. But thank you for tuning in. Um, Again, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to my channel, and I would love it if you did that. Also, there's that notification bell icon that guarantees that you'll get notification when I post a new video. And thank you very much all for tuning in. I hope you have a great night.